but he was mean. And I guess I'm just so small-minded that I just can't let go of that. Now remember that phrase, let go of it. And he, there was kind of a silence, and he said, well, as you know, Brian, speaking very, very academic-like, all anger comes from fear. And one of the most soul-satisfying experiences of my professional life was to turn to him and say, well, doctor, you are just flat wrong. It doesn't come from fear at all. Of course, the place lit up with laughter. It was great fun. And actually, he took it in. He took that better than he took the racquetball. Well, if it doesn't come from fear, there is a relationship. It's an important one. Between anxiety and fear. Also between anger and depression. What have we heard about that? If you are depressed, it is because of... Yes, anger turned inward, I think, is something that people commonly say. Okay, so what is it? What is the collection of thoughts that would give rise to anger? Any ideas?
The need to be heard.
The need to be heard and not being heard. Is that what you were saying?
It's survival. Primal need for survival. That's
Survival. Think of your life, your daily life. What is it that provokes your anger? Yes?
Things don't go your way or impatient.
Now we're beginning to cook. When things don't go your way, yes, yes. Anybody else?
Expectations.
Yes, expectations. Anything else?
That's a violation.
Violation. Okay. I love this topic. We have limited time, so I'm going to try to march through it fairly quickly. But I have reviewed many anger arousal theory models, and they are very cumbersome, some of them. One, which is promoted by an authority in the States on anger, a man by the name of Berkowitz. It's called the neo-associationistic model of anger arousal. I can't even pronounce it. I did then. I was very fortunate. I usually trip over it. But he considers every conceivable variable involved in the arousal of anger. And a colleague of mine was laughing that he had forgotten to consider the atmospheric pressure. It's very comprehensive. I think these are the necessary, if not sufficient, conditions for the arousal of anger. Number one is the assumption or the interpretation or the perception or the attribution of unfairness and injustice. Not having my way is how I define, in fact, unfairness. Violation is another of unfairness. Could be. There may be people that believe that their boundaries, sometimes my boundaries are violated or intruded upon, and it's not unfair. Sometimes I welcome it. The expectations, other people not meeting my expectations, sometimes may be interpreted as being very unfair. It is important to understand, I think, that anger results directly from the attachment of meaning to an event as being unjust, unfair, wrong. I'm not having my way. Now, anger varies in terms of its frequency, its duration, and its intensity. And the more unfairness that you would perceive in a given situation, the angrier you probably will get. Now, the other four variables have to do mostly with the determination determination of how angry, how loud the volume of anger will be, and how intense your angry feelings will be. Now, the second one, the second variable, has to do with the attachment of importance to the unfairness. The more important the unfairness is, the angrier you will be. Now, a buddy of mine is a surgeon in Tucson, a very brilliant man, and boy, has he been to school for a long time. He was in his, I think, he was 42 by the time he was able to, he was triple boarded, and I think at 42 he was finally able to practice independently and begin to operate in his own clinic. Brilliant, very successful, very wealthy man. He drives a Porsche Carrera 4S, which costs, I don't know if you've got car enthusiasts here. Formula One, I understand, is coming to town. I would love to be here for that. And this car is a marvelous car, sports car. Goes 160 miles an hour. Well, he was driving his $100,000+ car down a major street in Tucson, and a car with two young Hispanic men, whom he called to me skinheads, cut him off. He was immediately angry. He said, they came too close to my car. Okay. Did you think about hitting your brakes, backing off a little bit? No, he didn't. I guess he had a point to make with these two skinhead young men. Now, they were driving what is called a low rider. Do you have any idea what a low rider is? A low rider is a mechanical wonder of a vehicle. It's usually an older vehicle that has been rebuilt from bumper to bumper and has had installed in it a hydraulic system that will make it literally jump off the road at a stop sign. You can raise the left front, the right front, the rear, or all four. It's a fantastic machine. So this is also about a $75,000 piece of machinery. Well, these guys start going back and forth, and they're flipping each other off, and they're gesturing, and they're yelling at each other. And this man, this physician, decides to follow them home. Now, he does. Now, they happen to live in South Tucson, and South Tucson has the highest per capita murder rate in the United States. It's a 1 square mile part of Tucson, and it's the roughest neighborhood you ever want to be in. These people live in South Tucson. So here this guy is, angry. I don't know what he's going to do. And he's driving down. They pull into their carport. They get out of their car. He pulls alongside the curb. He gets out of his Porsche. And he's standing there. I said, well, what were you feeling? And he said he was feeling an enormous sense of anxiety and anger combination. And I said, were you shaking? And he says, yes. And I was afraid they could see it. And I said, well, what did you say? And he said, I didn't say anything. And I said, well, what did they say anything? And he said, yeah. I said, well, what did they say? And I really like these guys. I wish I could meet them. And one of them said, do you know where you are? And the other one said, equally brilliant, why don't you go home? Whereupon, he gets in his $100,000 Porsche and drives home and calls me. The attachment of importance. How important was this? His family, his practice, his 3 homes, his Porsche. Everything was on the line because somebody cut him off. The attachment of importance. The more importance you attach to the unfairness, However much unfairness you see, it's going to cause your anger to go up. The third variable, again, one that's involved more in the volume and the intensity of anger, would be a sense of entitlement. And lady back here said expectations. The more expectations you have, the higher your expectations are for your world and for the people that you are close to, and those, in fact, that you're not close to, the angrier you're going to be. Entitled people believe, of course, that the world should unfold according to the ways that they want it, and that will accommodate their needs and interests while being insensitive to the needs and interests of others. And the more entitled you feel, the less likely it is that people are just going to jump over those elevated expectations. So that too will cause you more unfairness and cause your anger to be louder. Now, entitlement also plays an interesting role in what you do when you are angry. A young man who was very quickly angry and very frequently angry that I was treating had just left a session in my office. And when he told me this, I was immediately reminded of the limitations of my skills and my effectiveness. He was sitting at a red light near my office, and it was a long red light. The light turns green, boom, it turns red again, and he's incensed. Would that anger anybody here? You seem like such a nice group of patient people. But he was angry. And I said, well, what did you do? And he said, well, it wasn't fair. You know, I missed my shot at the green, and so I just ran the red light. Almost running into the emergency vehicle that was the cause of the shortened green light, and one that he could not hear because he had his big booming stereo system going so loud and his subwoofer was bumping that he was totally unaware of it. Entitled people don't negotiate their issues of unfairness. They just grab for what they want and remedy things. You say, how do you resolve anger? Well, entitled people say, that's mine, I'm going to get it back. There's no negotiation. So, entitlement, the third variable of interest. The fourth is the assignment of intentionality to the agent of unfairness. Now, if somebody treats you bad, let's say that somebody's going to pick you up at 5:30 after work, and you really need to get home, and they're there at 6 o'clock, and you are angry because of the unfairness of your having to wait for a half hour. Then you say, well, why didn't you pick me up at 5:30? And they said, oh, you know, traffic at that time, people leaving work, it's very, no. You knew what traffic was. You should have left earlier. You are still angry at me from our argument last night, and you were intentionally late to hurt me. Now, they may not say that, but you get the idea. If you assign people intentionality in respect to treating you unfairly or badly or wrongly, you will be angry. Because now you have two levels of injustice to deal with, powering your anger. One is the original unfairness, right? The second one is the unfairness that they did it intentionally. The fifth and final one is very similar to the fourth one, and that's the attachment or the assignment of insensitivity. They may not be acting intentionally to wrong you, but they just may be uncaring people. They may be insensitive to you. And if that's the case, you may, in fact, be even angrier because of that additional level of unfairness. So that's the model. Anger is powerfully driven by assumptions, interpretations, perceptions of being wrong, of unfairness, of injustice. And its volume and intensity and its duration and frequency are often powered by those latter four variables. That's it, pure and simple. What do you think? Make sense? Think of the times that you have been angry. Does it fit? Okay, now we've got some, if it does, great. I like that because you agree with me. That's a very fair thing. Terrific, thank you. Okay, now, so you are angry. Now what? What do you do when you are angry? What is it that you customarily do when you get angry?
Raise your voice.
You raise your voice. Do all of you raise your voice?
Yes.
Yes? No. There are some people that lower their voice. Yes. Those are the ones that I'm concerned about. Okay. Lower your voice, raise your voice. What else?
Silent treatments.
Say again?
Silent treatment?
Silent treatment? Ooh, that implies motive, doesn't it? Treatment. You are doing something for a purpose, I would imagine. Okay. Yes. Did you have
Slam the door.
slam the door? That's my behavior, yes.
Sometimes you will ask yourself, why me? Why does it happen to me? Of all the people.
Why does this happen to me?
Of all the people.
Unsure.
Yes? Anything else?
Sweat.
Well, very interesting. I'm sure there are dozens and dozens of things we do when we are angry. I am wondering if it works for you. I'm wondering if it is effective. And we're kind of getting close to some philosophical issues that are very much important when we talk about controlling excessive anger. More on that in just a little bit. This is what I would like you to do. I would like you to stop. And this is unrealistic, but let's just pretend it is a perfect world. Stop and then decide whether your anger is justified or unjustified. Now, how would you determine if your anger is justified? Very easy. 5 variables. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go through and validate the accuracy of your perceptions and your judgments in determining, first of all, whether there is unfairness, and then determining the amount of importance and so on and so forth, that determine the volume and the intensity. And if you get yeses to all of those questions about all 5 variables, you've got what I call justified anger. And don't let anybody talk you out of it. How many times have people said to you when you said, I'm angry at you, you don't have a reason to be angry at me? Well, if you thoughtfully consider the injustice, which must necessarily come from your own subjective evaluation of this anger circumstance, you have a right to be angry, whether they agree with you or not. Many people say that because they don't want to be confronted. It's not a pleasant experience for them. So, now you've got justified anger. Now what do? Do you do the same thing? Do you raise your voice? Your anger is justified. You're perceiving things accurately. Now what?
Cook in the heat.
You
Cook in the heat.
cook in the heat. Cook in the heat of anger. Anything else? Well, again, in a perfect world, this is what I would like you to think of doing. How angry are you? How loud is your anger? And how bent are you on expressing it in a vengeful retaliatory way. I want you to think about your anger being on a scale from 0 to 10. 0 anger, of course, is 0. Moving up that scale to 10, which is maximum anger emotion. Emotion. Now, somewhere on that escalating scale for most of us, the emotion of anger will blend with verbal and or physical aggression and become abusive. That is the flashpoint beneath which I want you now to get yourself. So after you validate your anger, and by the way, if it is invalidated by no's to some of those questions, like this is not important, great, then you don't have anything to worry about. It should dissipate fairly quickly. But if you do have a valid anger, then I want you to determine how loud it is and what is your desire to smack somebody, verbally and or physically, to retaliate. That's very important. If it is above your flashpoint, get beneath it. Or should you? Now, this is the philosophical position that I want you to be thoughtful about. Is verbal, physical aggression ever justified? Show of hands. Is verbal and or physical aggression in response to being provoked and in response to being angry, i.e. perceiving another person has wronged us, is it ever justified? 1, 2, 3. Oh man, here comes it. How long do we have tonight? God bless you. I used to think along those lines, and was presented with an interesting dilemma several years ago. At the time, I was attending an Episcopal church in Tucson, and came to know and love an elderly couple who had made huge amounts of money in their life, and they were giving it all away. They were wonderful people. One Sunday afternoon, a young man who I later learned had been afflicted with fetal alcohol syndrome, broke into their house and asked them for their money and their 2 cars. And sadly, they refused and resisted. And he picked up some fireplace irons and proceeded to beat them both to death. And they died. Now, this young man, as it turns out, was a foster child of one of my closest colleagues in Tucson. He was a problem since the time he was about 6 or 7 years old and had been acting out, tried to set their house on fire. It was just a mess. But he seemed to be doing better, and they adopted him as their legal son. But things didn't get better for him, and he was responsible for this horrifying act. There is a program, America's Most Wanted, which featured this young man, and thankfully they found him wandering the streets of Nogales, Sonora, which is just across the border, about 16 miles south of Tucson. He was arrested, he was charged, he was tried, he was convicted, and when he was going to be sentenced, my colleague asked me, I want you to write a letter to the judge to spare my son's life. I was really conflicted about this because of what he had done to the people that were just beloved people. What would you have done? Would you have written a letter? Would you have said, no, I want your son to die? There's an interesting side story here about a little girl, 5 or 6 years old, who's watching an evening news items is featured of the execution of a criminal. And the little girl asks the father, "Daddy, why did they kill that man?" And the father says, well, when that man did something very bad and killed a person, then the government killed the man. And the little girl, 6 years old, says, "Well, then, Daddy, who's going to kill the government?" Interesting. So, would you have written the letter? You would have. To save this boy's life? Very conflicted. I wanted him to die. I'll be very frank.